right now, okay? One of those is that if we don't, the powerful forces we've unleashed, especially climate change, will overwhelm that local world and make it impossible for us to build it with the richness that it needs to happen. I'm going to give you just the tiniest, most anecdotal example from the small town in Vermont where I live, a very local and engaged and great place, a town of about 500 people. But 2 times this summer, we had rainstorms that dropped 8 inches of rain in 2 or 3 hours. I'm not good at metric conversions, so you're going to have to, suffice it to say, way more rain than we had ever seen before. Record rainfalls twice, okay? Why? Because warm air holds more water vapor than cold air does. We've seen dramatic increases in deluge around the world, just as we've seen dramatic increases in drought in the places where this water is being evaporated. Those deluges in our case were enough not only to wash out the roads around our town and cut us off from the rest of the world at enormous expense, they're also enough to wash away our community gardens for the year, you know, our food source. We are looking at that writ 100 times larger around the world unless we very quickly manage to reach a strong international agreement to control carbon. The latest science from a few weeks ago says that it's entirely possible that we will see sea level rise unless we do everything right on the order of 2 meters in the course of this century. Okay? That's a civilization challenging number around huge parts of the world, coastal cities and low-lying fertile farmlands. It's going to be bad in any event, climate change. We've bought already another degree or so of warming just from the carbon we've already put into the atmosphere. The question we're now going to have to decide is whether it's going to be unbearably bad or whether we can do the very difficult, very quick things to shift the world's economy away from fossil fuel and keep us within the bounds of some kind of tolerable level of change, something to which we can adapt, or whether we're going to produce so much change that adaptation proves completely impossible. By the same token, if we were to do that work, if we were to reach that kind of international agreement, then a real global change would make this process of localization much, much easier. The reason that our world looks the way that it does today in terms of its sprawling globalism as well as its increasing temperature is that we've had endless access to cheap fossil fuel. Any global agreement about climate change, in essence, will be to change the price of that carbon, to raise it, to make it more expensive to burn fossil fuel, and when we do, then the forces of economic gravity will aid and not hamper the conversion to something more sensible on this planet. The economic wind will become at our backs. Farmers' markets will be not only for people who appreciate the taste of real tomatoes and who like their neighbors, but for everybody who can make any kind of calculation with their pocketbook as well. And that's, if we're going to do the things we need to do in the time we need to do them, very, very important to happen. Already we can see it starting to happen. When the price of oil went up in the United States this year, most of the economy began the decline that we now see reaching this crisis point, but there were a few people that did better. The most interesting of them was the biggest seller of garden seeds in the country, of vegetable seeds in the country, the Burpee Company, which doubled its sales last spring over the spring before. And I imagine will double them again next spring. That's the kind of change you get when the economic equation begins to change and change fast, and it's why we need that sort of international agreement. How do we get there? There's going to be a big meeting in Copenhagen in December of next year. This will be the last plausible chance for the international community to come up with a strategy that actually controls global warming. Okay? Yes, I see I've got exactly 6 minutes and 20 seconds, and I'm not going to use a second more of them. I might use less. If those meetings were held today, the result would be disaster. We would produce an agreement that would allow politicians to claim that they'd done something, but in fact would lock us forever into a path that made the possibility of ever getting back to 350 parts per million CO2 completely impossible. It would set us on that course forever and ever. If we're going to do otherwise, we need to build in very short order the kind of political movement around the world that can leverage some actual change out of our leaders. Our attempt to do this, beginning in the States, but now in the last few months, we've got people, organizers, offices all over the world, is a campaign that I want you to become involved with called 350.org, 350.org, okay? And when you go there later today, as I hope you will on your computers, you will see the opportunity to do all sorts of things. Basically, our hope is to just take that number and spread it around the world in the next 13 months before Copenhagen, to make it the one thing that everybody knows if they know nothing else about climate. So we've had churches ringing their bells 350 times, and we've had, which no TV reporter, it turns out, can resist coming to take a picture of, and we've had, 350 people riding bicycles places, and it's quite moving to open the email on any given day, and there'd be a picture from a farmer in the Cameroon, in Africa, and he'd somehow heard about this and gotten together with his neighbors and planted 350 trees on the edge of the village and hung a little. So, well, that's moving because people in Cameroon haven't done a damn thing to cause this problem, but people all over the world are beginning to try to figure out how to solve it. Right now, we're running a campaign that we really need you to help with to get people around the world to invite either Mr. Obama or Mr. McCain, whichever one wins, to come to the next big climate talks in Poland this December to announce that the U.S. will re-enter this international negotiation shamefully from which we've abstained for the last 8 years. So you can go and you can not only send an invitation yourself quite easily, you can also, if you're brave enough, do the thing that's hard in break the taboo that's hard in our moment, and dump your email address book into our system for a one-time use to send to all your friends and everybody you know this same message and this same request. One of the very few wild cards that we have, one of the very few technologies that may be disruptive enough to allow us to be able to mount a real campaign around the world against enormous vested interest in very short time, is this emerging wildcard technology of the connection electronically around the net. If everybody here shared their address books on their email inbox, that stuff about 6 degrees of separation turns out to be entirely true. We'd be able to reach pretty much everybody in the world within 3 or 4 jumps doing that, and it's that kind of viral thing that we need to do. We've seen it happen before. With no money and with 6 college kids and me last year in the United States, we managed in the course of 3 months to organize 1,400 demonstrations in all 50 states around climate change, the biggest day of environmental activism in the States since the first Earth Day. And when we did it, it was enough to 3 days later, both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama changed their energy platform and said that they were now in favor of 80% cuts in carbon emissions in the United States. We felt good about that. We felt bad 3 weeks later when the Arctic Ocean melted and it revealed that really we were not ahead of the game, we were behind it. It made us resolve to go on and try to build this global network, this 350.org thing in time. That's where I'm going to end, saying that once one knows particular facts about the world to be true, once one has those facts, then it is, I'm afraid, morally incumbent upon one to act upon them, to do something about them. And so I have done you the great disservice today of telling you one of those facts about the world, that 350 parts per million CO2 is the most that is compatible with our civilization and with much of the rest of the life on this planet. We have 13 months to get that message across around the world, and so I'm afraid it is now incumbent upon you to do it. I have finished with 1 minute and 17 to spare and set a good example for the day to come. Thank you very much.